So I had a client who was dealing with massive fluctuations in his coaching business, and it actually had nothing to do with his business strategy, but everything to do with his productivity, discipline, and personal performance. For context, one month he'd hit like 50K cash collected. But then the next month, because he was riding a bit of a high, he'd get complacent, comfortable, take his foot off the gas, and then he'd be back down to like 25K. And it was just this pattern and cycle of massive ups and downs in his personal performance and income. And if this resonates with you at all, in this video, I'm going to share with you the core shift that my client needed to make in order to step off of this income roller coaster and develop pure consistency in his productivity, discipline, and personal performance, which then led to greater consistency in scaling his business and income. And so the source of this problem comes down to the motivational framework that you're psychologically operating on. And there's two types. You have outcome-based motivation and identity-based motivation, as I like to define it. The key difference between these two is what you're focusing on, but more specifically, where you're placing your self-worth. With outcome-based motivation, you're placing your self-worth on outcomes. With identity-based motivation, it's all about reinforcing your self-worth through aligned behavior. And the reason that my client was experiencing this inconsistency and massive ups and downs in his performance and income was because he was relying on outcome-based motivation, where he was hyper fixated on whether or not he was hitting those big numbers in his business. If he was, well, he felt great about himself. But if he wasn't, he felt terrible about himself. And it's important to realize that the inputs and actions are what produce the outcomes to begin with. Outcomes don't happen in a vacuum, and they are produced by specific actions done over a consistent period of time. And so I'm not saying that outcomes aren't important. They certainly have their place. And it's very important to know, the outcomes that you're optimizing for, because they can guide your behavior and also the trajectory of your business. But when you place your self-worth on the outcomes and you generate your motivation entirely out of this framework of outcome focus, that's where the problem arises. So because my client had his self-worth attached to the big numbers in his business, when he would have a big month, it would lead to him experiencing this very intense emotional high where he's feeling happy, worthy, on top of the world, and comfortable. And this comfort would quickly turn into complacency, where he would stop taking the actions, he would take his foot off the gas, and cause and effect, his performance would dip, and then the next month his income would dip. But what would follow is that his self-worth would also dip. So when his income would tank, he would start to freak out a little bit, and in his words, would start to feel like a broke piece of shit. And this would create a lot of fear, a lot of scarcity, a lot of pain that would drive him to start doing all those inputs and actions again to get back to those big numbers as quickly as possible. Mainly just so that he could feel good about himself again. But this would just repeat itself. Once he's back to the big numbers, the source of his motivation would become satisfied, and that would then kill the drive to keep pushing forward and continue making the proper sacrifices. And this is why outcome-based motivation is very unsustainable, it's not stable, and ultimately leads to this cycle of just, massive ups and downs and overall inconsistency in performance, and, that leads into inconsistency in your business. Because it makes your motivation very finite. As soon as you get what you want, it kills the drive to keep pressing forward. If you want to continue to keep driving yourself forward consistently, you effectively have to say that the goal that you just achieved is now just not good enough, and you're still a piece of shit, and you now have to get to a new goal. And once you get to that goal, then you'll be able to feel good about yourself. But really, you'll just keep repeating that, right? Once you get to that goal, no, actually, it's not good enough. You got to get to this one. And there are people that drive themselves this way, and, it can drive some success, but what that means is that you're basically just living your entire life in a state of just not feeling good enough. And this can make the process and the journey very stressful and very just frustrating. And this then feeds into the complacency that comes later, because it's very exhausting to drive yourself from this fear, lack, and scarcity constantly. And so instead of outcome-based motivation, I helped my client shift into an identity-based motivational framework, where instead of placing his self-worth and emotional stability on whether or not he was hitting those big numbers in his business or not, he instead focused on reinforcing his self-worth through the key actions and behaviors that represent the identity he wanted to embody. And this identity was the version of him that he knew was required to materialize his high-level vision for his life in business. And then based on that identity, we extracted out the key non-negotiable actions and inputs that version of him would execute on a daily and weekly basis to drive his business forward consistently. So once that was clear, that's all he needed to focus on. So now, instead of only celebrating a big month, a big week, or even just a big day, he now celebrates every single day as long as he stuck to those key non-negotiable actions. And when you focus on reinforcing your self-worth by executing those daily, weekly, non-negotiable actions, not only are you actually shifting your identity into the person that you deeply want to become and driving your business forward consistently, you also effectively remap your pain and pleasure circuits. And so instead of feeling a ton of pleasure and positive emotion when you have the outcomes that you want or you hit those big numbers, or experiencing a ton of pain when you don't get the outcomes you want or have a lower income month, it's flipped. Now, pleasure and positive emotion will come from following through on your key non-negotiable actions. And you'll experience pain if you don't follow through on those actions. So now, whether or not you have a big month won't change your behavior. Sure, you'll still feel positive emotion for achieving outcomes and, hitting big months in your business, of course, obviously, right? But it won't justify your behavior, because what justifies your behavior is who you want to be. And your self-worth is tied to that identity and the actions that represent it. So if you have a day where you get complacent and take your foot off the gas, you will experience pain. So you'll be motivated to continue pressing forward and showing up properly, because that is what makes you feel great about yourself. And also because you don't want to experience the pain that comes from not following through on your non-negotiable actions. And this here is what creates that consistent drive to perform at a high level and stay disciplined in your business regardless of any outcome. So instead of your business being about hitting these short-term big wins, it's now about becoming the version of you that consistently drives your business to the next level with absolute effectiveness and ease. And so practically on a daily basis, all you need to focus on is whether or not you hit your key non-negotiable actions. If you did, then it's a win. You can feel good about yourself, confident, at peace inside of yourself. And when you're stacking up days like this, you generate this insane amount of momentum that is so hard to break. But let's say that on one day you didn't follow through on your non-negotiable actions. Well, you're going to experience pain, but then you can use that pain to immediately get back on track and crush it the next day. And after some time operating in this motivational frame, it'll just become who you are. You won't have to think about it anymore. It'll just be automatic. And this is the core shift that my client needed to make in order to step off of that income roller coaster and develop pure consistency in his productivity, discipline, and personal performance. Regardless of him hitting the big numbers or not, he stayed focused, hit his key non-negotiables, and showed up as the man that he wanted to be and knew he needed to be. And ultimately, this just led to him actually scaling his business and his income way more consistently. And this is the core shift that my client needed to make in order to step off of that income roller coaster and develop pure consistency in his productivity, discipline, and personal performance. Regardless of him hitting the big months or not, he stayed focused on executing his non-negotiable actions and showing up as the man that he wanted to be and knew that he needed to be. And ultimately, this just led to him actually scaling his business and income way more consistently. And if you want to learn more about how I help online coaches and agency owners develop truly consistent peak personal performance so they can take their business to that next level in record time, then I'd love to invite you to go ahead and check out the main video on my channel. Basically, I just do an overview of my coaching program and I break down and show the system that my clients use to generate consistent peak performance. You're going to get a ton of value just watching the video, but you're also going to get a lot of your questions answered if you are interested in that. Either way, I hope you got a ton of value in this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.